thank you for joining Wars of the Rosies as we continue with part 16 of Fundamental Laws, a report of the 68th Convocation of the Rose-Cross Order. Invocation of the Hierarchies. In the early Christian church and in the religious life of the early Christians, the invocation of the saints, as it was termed, was accepted as an important part of life. It is one of the fundamental doctrines of the Apostles' Creed, and there stands a monument to this feature of religious service. Gradually, as men wandered away from the true religious life, the life of service and helpfulness, the secret of the invocation of the saints was lost. By the vast multitudes who are devoted to the church today, nothing is known of the invocation of the saints, except the mention of it in the Apostles' Creed, and to this little thought is given as to its real meaning. By no means did belief in the invocation of the saints originate with the early Christians. It was handed down to them from a still earlier religious practice. In its original form, it was known as Invocation of the Hierarchies, or Invocation of the Guardian Angels. This feature of religion was powerful in primitive custom, especially among the Egyptians. Adherents of this practice believed that all interest of human life and all elements of nature are under the care of superior hierarchies, or guardian and ministering angels. With the ancient initiates, religion was more than a formulated creed. To them it was a reality. To them it was life. A certain part of their time was given up to religious practices, just as certain portions of time were devoted to manual labor and to procuring the necessities of life. They understood the soul and its mysteries. They understood that man is a composite creature and that the body is only a part of his being. That body and soul are co-equal, each with the other. And that body and soul have each a duty to perform. The body to nature and the soul to God. This understanding of the composition of man gave them a clear comprehension of prayer as a means of putting soul and body in correct relation with God and nature. The initiates, however, did not follow a formal system of prayer. Prayer to them was more than lip service. They understood hierarchic, celestial rulership, and recognized intermediary powers and potentates in the management of the universe. As in the government of the people, there is one supreme ruler, with many officers of subordinate rank to execute the laws of the supreme ruler. So, accordingly, to the conception of the initiates, the universe is the product of one supreme creator and ruler, one supreme divine being. But with him is associated a core of subordinate being and powers, through whom the work of the one supreme ruler is performed. These subordinate beings were termed hierarchies, or celestial potentates, or guardian angels. They guarded the destinies of men and performed the will of the infinite in all things. This unquestioning recognition of hierarchies or angelic host made prayer to them an actual invocation, through which they came into conscious touch with the hierarchies or angelic forces. Thus, when they proved worthy and were sincere in their demand, they received help in accordance with their invocation. By the priesthood of Egypt, initiates were instructed in the laws and the principles of invocation. By the priest of Melchizedek also were invocations fully taught. Indeed, the laws and the teachings of Melchizedek were the foundation of Egyptian initiation. It was these teachings with which every neophyte must become familiar before he was permitted to minister to the public. So long as the great priesthood of Egypt continued to exist, up to the time of the usurpers, all kings were trained in these principles, and no one could become a king until he had first become an initiate. For this reason they were called initiate or priest kings. It must not be thought that the people generally understood the invocation religion. The people then, as now, repeated formulas, witnessed beautiful and impressive ceremonies, and believed in them, with meager comprehension of the truth on which formulas and ceremonies were based. Today, however, It is a question whether even the minister at the head of the flock knows what is meant fully by invocation of saints. At the beginning of the Christian era, there were not many of the initiates left. It was an age of change, an age in which the old had to give place to the new because the old had been abused. Yet so strong was the belief still held in the invocation of the hierarchies that it was incorporated into the creed of the apostles, founders of the early Christian church, instead of being retained in its purity as an article of faith in the invocation of the hierarchies. Beings and forces, pure and powerful, in the service of the one supreme God, it degenerated into a mere verbal expression of faith in the invocation of saints, men and women who had gone on before. Some may claim that it is more reasonable to believe in the invocation of saints than in the invocation of the hierarchies. Let this argument be answered by questions. How did God affect the progress of the world and of mankind before saints existed? How is it that the world continued to exist and was founded when so-called heathenism is supposed to have reigned? Or if the world could exist and progress enough to make the coming of a Messiah possible, why could it not continue in the same manner without the help of the saints? Moreover, it must be remembered that God did not canonize men. Men are canonized as saints by men, mere human beings, and history shows that the lives of many who have been registered as saints were by no means exemplary according to accepted standards of uprightness. It is reasonable, then, to suppose that any good could come from invocation to those who may not be superior even to the invocate himself. How can we expect good from the practice of invocation unless the ones whom we invoke are on a plane far superior to human knowledge and power? A marked contrast indeed between invocation of saints and invocation of hierarchies is seen when it is remembered that the hierarchies are none other than the Elohim, creative forces and potencies associated with the infinite. There is every evidence for the belief that the invocation of saints, as referred to in the Apostles' Creed, was descended from the Egyptians. Its form has been modified, and it has degenerated into an article of faith merely, whereas formerly among the initiates of Egypt it was a sacred daily practice, a feature of worship, or, better, a feature of life, essential to every day. Through all sacred scriptures, whether it be the Bible of Christianity, or Buddhism, or Brahmanism, or of any other religious system, is to be found the doctrine that there are guardians or ministering angels watching over the destinies of men. It is a fact generally admitted that men of the early church, when under persecution, were guarded, guided, sustained, protected by angels or angelic presences and influences. Not only these, but according to general acceptance, prophets and seers of all times have been administered unto by angels sent by the Lord to save them, by priests of the Church of Melchizedek, and by Egyptian initiates. These ministering spirits were called hierarchies or Elohim, and invocations to them were in harmony with the specific work performed by the particular hierarchy addressed. Now it must be remembered that prophets and seers and holy men of old invoked the help, guidance, and protection of higher potentates long centuries before the Apostles' Creed was possible. Therefore, it was not saints, canonized men of the church, who saved and helped those who appealed to the higher powers. These things indicate that invocation or higher forces was not original with the early church. From every point of view, it seems plausible to claim that it was a modified form of the old initiate priest service of the ancient Egyptian priesthood. Nevertheless, invocation of saints, as a relic of the invocation of hierarchies, rests upon a true and a firm foundation. In its essential features, invocation of hierarchies should be revived and become a part of the religious life of every human being. It must be revived before religion can be what it once was, a living, powerful, life-giving reality. In ancient worship, a part of the service was devoted to the invocation of the hierarchies that have guard each over some particular territory of the kingdom of God or the kingdom of nature. Thus, in sorrow, in sickness, in failure, in misfortune of any kind, in fact, in all things which affect the destiny of man, there is a particular guardian and ministering angel or hierarchy, which has charge of that domain of human life. Moreover, there is also an invocation adapted to the needs of each department of man's nature. This invocation, issuing in humanity, faith, and sincerity from the heart of the suppliant, and being directed to the hierarchy exercising guardianship over that department of human interest, unfailingly secures the help of the hierarchy invoked. Superstition, this? Possibly, but in that case, let the Church at once proceed to cut out the Apostles' Creed, its expression of belief in the invocation of saints, for it is one and the same thing stated in different words. The new church, the coming church of man, recognizes the truth that underlines invocation of hierarchies as practiced in its original simplicity by initiate priests of all ages. It regards the invocation of the hierarchies as a possibility, a verity, which should be understood and practiced by all men. It is, in fact, the very foundation of true religion. It is the essential of true religious life. It is the secret of true prayer. Mankind generally is coming to recognize this great truth. Hey, even the established church is coming to see it. But the established church cannot now step backward and make invocation a part of its service. It has waited too long, and such an innovation is clearly impossible. The Right Reverend Arthur Ingram, Bishop of London, recently in one of the annual services in the Church of England Congress held at Southampton, made a plea for the restoration of the saints. He made a plea for the restoration of that aspect of the doctrine of the communion of saints to which every Christian, reciting the Apostles' Creed, is pledged. It is well said that history repeats itself, and that there are cyclic returns of customs and practices. Let us remember, however, that history repeats not verbatim or word for word, but that, through the experience of a lapse from a worthy practice, history revives the practice in purified form. For many centuries, for ages before the Christian era, invocation of the hierarchies existed as the foundation of religious worship and religious life. In measure, the early church recognized the facts underlying invocation of hierarchies and attempted to incorporate the principle of invocation in the religious system. They failed, however, to make it an actual living fact, a part of daily life. They failed to instill into their adherents the necessity of daily use of invocation according to the individual need. As a result, the practice degenerated into a formality and, being deprived of life, became lost to view until at the present time, little is known of it except the incidental mention of belief in communion of the saints as recorded in the Apostles' Creed. And now, after many centuries, leading men of the church are beginning to see what humanity has lost through being deprived of this essential feature of religious worship. Man has gone from one extreme to another, from irreligion to irreligion, until he has no firm foundation on which to stand. He keeps waiting for something to come to him which he can accept, something which, to his reasoning mind, has a firm basis. All this, some few of the established church are forced to admit, and the plea of the Right Reverend Ingram for the re-establishment of the invocation of the saints' voices, the conviction of these few. But the established church, having long ago parted with the service of invocation, cannot restore it. They have lost the key, the mystery, to it. the real significance of it, and it is, to them, a dead letter. Moreover, even if they possessed the ritual of hierarchic invocation, they could not reinstate the service, for the reason that their adherents would not stand for it. Such a radical, though natural, innovation. Consequently, the church will be forced to do the best it can until the new church, the church with the ritualistic invocative service, will have become strong, so useful, so natural, that the old church will be absorbed in it. By no means is the established church to be condemned for having lost its hold on hierarchic invocation. It has done all that it could, all it knew how to do. When the change was made from the so-called heathen error to the Christian error, everything had to be given up that was of the old, and, though much of the outer form of the old was given up, so as not to savor of the discarded worship, consequently, that which had been a living, vital reality became no more than a part of the creed of the new church, a doctrine to be accepted as correct teaching, but not as a truth to be lived. The age in which the hierarchic invocation is demanded by the people is not far distant. In fact, it has already begun. The old ritual of hierarchic invocation, of which history gives little information, has been faithfully preserved and is in the care of the new church, the church now in the process of formation, that being the Order of the Magi degree. Note, the Order of the Magi degree, Priest of Melchizedek, uses the complete ancient ritual in all its beauty. This means the ushering in of a new era, an era made possible by the cyclic ebb and flow of human progress, an era in which human history revives in purified form a religious practice formerly honored and cherished by initiates of old. It is to be an era in which men will demand that the priest or clergy of the church to which they belong shall be conversant with the entire ritual of invocation intercession. More than this, they will demand priests who are qualified to use invocative prayers in their behalf. They will be satisfied with nothing less than priests, teachers, ministers, or leaders in whom they have unwavering confidence, both as regards purity and sincerity of motive, and as regards superior ability in the effective and the intelligent use of invocative power. The time is come in which men and women generally, seekers after truth, demand as leaders and teachers those who are qualified to give authoritative instruction and to impart vital knowledge. The people demand basic knowledge concerning religious practices. They require the reason, the why, and the wherefore for religious customs. When they are convinced that a certain religious practice is based on undeniable principles and that it is powerful and effective for the needs of daily life, and that it is regenerative in its influence, they will be satisfied with nothing less than definite and authoritative instruction in regard to it. They will demand the knowledge that can be tested in personal experience. They will demand the knowledge that enables them to make intelligent use of the practice according to their own needs. Such knowledge, such instruction will soon be in demand regarding hierarchic invocation and invocative prayer. The new church of the present age will not fasten creeds and articles of faith on its adherents, but it will teach vital truths. Truths which are not only to be believed, but also to be lived. The new church will consider daily life and daily needs. Its invocations will be such as have to do with the conditions in which its members live. Invocation will be something which calls for the help that is required by frail, groping humanity. It will bring its people into touch with those powers which they seek. In accordance with the cyclic rhyme of historic changes, the time is ripe for a replacement of emphasis on hierarchic invocation. Mankind is reawakening to the beliefs held by the ancient initiates. It is well to know that God is all, and that without Him is nothing. But it is also well to know that He works in a multitude of ways. that he works through those which are less than he, and that he ministers to mankind through powers and potentates, which, though inferior to the infinite and intermediary, are specifically qualified to satisfy human need. As God works through human agencies, so does he also work through hierarchic instrumentality, and no part of the multiplicity of human interest is left without its appropriate guardianship and protectorate from the invisible forces. Here again, by way of analogy, may be brought into use the law of Hermes, as above, so below, and as below, so above, as in human government, so in celestial. To gain a hearing in any given department of governmental administration, a man does not appeal to the supreme power direct, but to the subordinate power to whom has been entrusted authoritative supervision in that particular domain. For a matter of importance that concerns the army or navy or the treasury, we do not think of directing our communication to the president or the supreme ruler of the nation. Rather, we address the department in which our concern is classified. If we do not know the name and title and how properly to address the one to whom our communication should come, we seek the desired information and make our communication in conformity with accepted usage. Similarly, it is reasonable to think of God as the supreme ruler of the universe, with subordinate powers as co-workers and co-rulers. In celestial powers, there is this difference. They are true to their divine nature, true to God and true to their work. Their motives are clean, pure and unselfish. They must grant or refuse a demand according to the justice or the injustice of the request. Whereas in natural and in state management, officers and executives are biased and hampered by human frailties and weaknesses. It is likewise reasonable to think of hierarchic powers or Elohim as having appropriate titles or designations by which man must appeal to them, and by means of which he must invoke them. The title or name or designation of the hierarchic power is important, however, not as a mere arbitrary requirement. It is to be thought of as the key to the vibration to which that particular hierarchy responds. Thus, to use the correct appellation of a deific potentate and to make use of a suitable formula serves as a means of bringing the invocate into contact with the power sought. Titles and degrees, as designations of honor, or station, or authority, have no place among the Elohim. To inform oneself of the correct title and the appropriate formula by which to address a given hierarchy or deific power, and to become skillful in the use of it, is to awaken in the invocate that subtle vibratory force which puts him in harmony with the particular power invoked. On the human plane, address to a superior power must conform to correct usage for conventional reasons. On the celestial plane, for reasons vital and fundamental, without which it is impossible to reach the vibratory realm in which that deific power dwells, but with which it is possible to strike the chord of its vibration. All these things the initiates who have been faithful to the true laws have long recognized. All these things have been privately taught, though usually under a code or secret system. But at last, the time is at hand in which it is made possible, and in which it has even become necessary to speak plainly and openly. Even the modern church father is beginning to recognize the truth and the reality that underlies customs followed in the days of primitive religion, customs which the established church of the present day never had. For, though reference is made in the apostolic creed of the invocation of saints, the fact remains that invocation of the saints has never been observed by the church, and, on account of the failure of the church to teach and to practice a vital religion and a religious life, it has failed at its aims, which, admittedly, were of the best, and men are leaving the church with no thought of returning to it. But, in the horizon, in the east, as the sun rises on a June morning, comes into view the new church, the new order of things, The Illuminati and their inner priesthood are again beginning to teach the people a living, pulsating, vital, livable system. A system throbbing with force and power. They are again establishing among the children of men a religious system as glorious, as divine, as life-giving as was ever practiced by the ancient priesthoods, when religion was pure and undefiled, when the priests of the temple admittedly had great power and were the teachers, healers, rulers of the people. Let it not be thought that when such a church is established, the service will consist of an invocational program merely. Nothing of the kind. The service will admit a variety and will appeal to the varied interest of man's composite nature. There will be a place for music which will lift the souls of men from the commonplace to the divine. Sermons should be lectures or addresses of real instruction, food for thought, or practical value to the soul, something more than flowery oratory which has neither aim nor end. Let it be clearly understood that the establishment of invocative prayer to the hierarchies would in no sense do away with prayers of devotion and adoration and gratitude to the one God, the Father over all. Invocative prayers to the hierarchic powers or Elohim would be only for specific purposes, while the devotional prayer would continue to be addressed to the one true and only God. Invocative prayer to the hierarchic powers and potentates would be in case of sickness, in case of sorrow, or in the many other specific cases, but the spirit pervading the entire service would be devotion and worshipful adoration and gratitude directed to Him in whom we live and move and have our being. One form of prayer would supplement the other. The two forms of worship would be in full harmony with each other and not, as some might think, a false worship or worship of false gods. In short, prayer of worship or adoration or gratitude would not be directed to hierarchic potentates, for all worship is directed to God. Invocative prayer differs from the prayer of worship or adoration in this point. It is distinctively and exclusively, as the name indicates, a prayer in which a particular hierarchy is invoked for a specific purpose and with a specific request. In passing, it is worthy of mention that the most beautiful and impressive magical rites and invocative prayers in the system of the ancient initiates are those which invoke the hierarchies for wisdom and an understanding heart. This is definite and specific, and who can question the desirability of a specific invocation for wisdom and an understanding heart? Furthermore, another great change is to be advocated. That is, the inauguration of true family worship. The time was when there was a family service once, twice, or 3 times a day. The head of the family acted as a priest for the home. He led the members of the family in daily worship, following a formula or a system of worship. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment. And if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Rosies. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.